This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Play, a leading game developer providing player favorites to the most successful brands across the industry. With an award-winning multi-product portfolio of slots, live casino, bingo, virtual sports, and more, Pragmatic Play is powering up new possibilities of play through one single API. Visit pragmaticplay.com and discover your favorite every time.
And welcome back to the podcast, Alex Pratt, MD of Clarion Gaming. How are you doing today?
Very good, thank you.
Amazing. Good to have you back here, of course. We are talking today about some big news that was announced, obviously, last week here that ICE is moving to Barcelona from London. But not only that, of course, there was a second news to this as well, which is that IGBL Amsterdam is moving to London. So I was thinking it'd be great to have you on here on the podcast to get some clarity around these moves, why they are happening, and what will this mean for these events. But first and foremost, Alex, why did you decide to start this consultation of potentially moving ICE in the first place? I believe those thoughts started already 2020 or 2021, long process, of course. Can you talk a little bit about why you were keen to move ICE from London?
Yeah, and I'd say that conversation or those conversations were probably going on for the last decade. Pre me even running the event, there'd been discussions in various boardrooms, actually with various cities as well, prior to 2020. With regards to moving ICE, and that's been driven by the rising cost of London, but also just in terms of the growth opportunity and looking outside of actually what can ICE be if it was in a different location. I think that then really accelerated off the back of, I guess, two things. One was Brexit. So coming in, it was kind of at the time it was a threat of Brexit, because actually we never really got to test it, because the other thing that came in was COVID. Which we all remember with fondness now. But COVID really, it gave people time to sit back and say, actually, why am I spending my money on all their different live events, all their different styles of marketing? Is it the right type of marketing? Is it the right ROI that we're getting? Are we getting value? So I think as we came into 2021, we had an increased volume of noise, I'd guess, from our customer base, but also from media as well, asking us to look at it. And from my perspective, it was something that if we didn't look at it, then actually we're not doing our job. And if we ignore your customer, it's never going to end up well.
Right. And so the options that you came up with were basically Paris, Madrid, Barcelona, or stay in London. And can you talk a little bit maybe about like why those cities were selected, and at the end of the day, how did you come to the decision to move to Barcelona?
It's a big question. I think Pierre, probably being an event organizer, at least 3 or 4 times during your event, various people would suggest cities that you should move your event to. I think when you get deeper than that, it's a lot more difficult than looking at cities across the map of Europe. And that short list of 4 came about through a whole bunch of different processes. First of all, can it hold the size of and scale of ICE and IGB affiliate London? And Amsterdam was an obvious one people kept suggesting, and it can't. If it moved to Amsterdam, it would have to take every single space within the halls, decrease by 20%. And it would be an absolute nightmare. So that was number 1. Number 2 is availability. There's tons of shows going on around. We need 6 days build, 4 days takedown, plus the 3 days in between. So we're taking it for almost 2 weeks, that whole entire venue. And there's many venues don't have that space to give us. And then there's stuff about actually, is it the right place to run a gaming event? So Germany is a really obvious place for us to go, full of really big venues, but talking to our customer base, our stakeholders, particularly on the land-based side, we got feedback that wouldn't be the country that they would support. So to be honest, we were left with, and not in a bad way, but I guess the top 4 that were left that were available, were Paris, Barcelona, Madrid, London. Then in terms of how we got to the choice of Barcelona, it is the most intricate process I've ever been in, and so much more work than we thought it would be. And the thing I laugh at now is Stu's the MD of the events within gaming. We thought we'd do it ourselves, and we thought it'd be really easy. Actually, we brought in this outside consultant, and it's far more complicated than I ever thought it would be. And actually, the process has taught not just us, but Clarion a whole different ways of looking at venues. And that meant that we split the decision into a scorecard that split into, if I can get this right, I think it's 50% customer, so that's exhibitor and an attendee, and that's around cost and ease of exhibiting and cost and ease of attending. Then 30% was the city itself. Has it got the right infrastructure from an event perspective? Does it have the right infrastructure for gaming? And does it want us to be there? Is it going to support us? If we're going to move, we're only going to move to somewhere that wants us to be there. We're not going to be hidden behind a wall. And then the last 20% was Clarion, so cost and ease of putting on the show for us. So it was always customer-led. It always had to be backed by the customer, because if it wasn't in the long term, again, when it's not going to work, no one's going to support it, and it will fail. And then within those categories, there was about 30 different scoring points that then broke down further. In the end, this Excel's about 200 lines of some stuff really factual, like how many planes fly in per day from each location to score that. Some stuff are much harder, and that we had to build out things like basket of goods of a typical attendee, and what does that look like if you're coming from the US, if you're coming from Armenia, if you're coming from Malta. So lots of complicated ways of doing that. And then in between all of that, we're also negotiating with those cities for the 4 months, running right up to final presentations, I think, on June 7th. But then we had another 3 weeks of negotiations following that. And then, in fact, we were still negotiating the week before we announced. So it was to the deadline. And so I guess, look, why Barcelona was chosen. On that advisory board, it wasn't chosen by everyone. I think it's important to point out there was 24 people on the advisory board at the time. Actually, 3 didn't vote, and actually they've now voted. Now they've seen all the information. We've had conversations with them. So in the end, 18 opted for Barcelona, 5 opted for London, and 1 was neutral. Basically said, look, we'll support wherever it goes. And that was a whole mix. And I think what was really important to me was that it had to be a mix of land-based, online, EMEA, North America, different size of stands, different products, because what I didn't want to do was split the industry down the middle. And actually, when we started this process in London, I thought it would be a massively polarizing process where we would have to make an uncomfortable decision. Thankfully, we didn't. Obviously, not everybody's happy, but yeah, I think the good thing is that I believe in the process, and the customers made the decision for us. Otherwise, this would be a very different, more uncomfortable conversation with you.
For sure. But still, the elephant in the room, I suppose, here, of course, is that we are just a couple of months or a month away from SBC Barcelona, which is establishing their own flagship event in Barcelona as kind of their home turf, let's say. And I don't think it escaped anyone that SBC and Rasmus reacted pretty strongly to this decision by Clarion to move ICE to Barcelona. Rasmus mentioned in that post that he felt that ICE is kind of running them over or something like this. He insinuated something along those lines. So, first and foremost, did you consider the fact that there's already a super show, if you will, in Barcelona? And secondly, is there any answer to the comment of Rasmus, perhaps, that you have as well, or any message to SBC in general?
Yeah, look, I think, did we consider there was an event there? We knew there was an event there. It doesn't come on there's not like within our scoring metric system, there was no score, is there an event there? I think, look, from a personal perspective, and it was the customers that, I think I always go back, the customers made decisions, and many of those customers are exhibitors at Barcelona. For sure, they brought it up in the conversations when we had those conversations with them, but they didn't feel it would have an impact on their choice to exhibit there or their choice to exhibit ICE. I think the big thing is that no one's really talking about is they're vastly different shows, like so different. Okay, a segment within ICE is on iGaming and sports betting, which is where SBC focuses. But even then, for me, like, I run IGB Live, and I'd say IGB Live is closer to SBC. Like, they're 10,000, 10, 15,000, 15,000 SBC's case. When you go to IGB Live, and we had 10,000 registrations, the difference between walking into IGB Live and walking into ICE is so vast. I mean, I don't think anyone could go, wow, this is, because it's just different. And I think ICE, on top of that, has the entire global industry at that show, whether it's land, street, esports, gaming. So I think, for one, it's a totally different event. I think for two, I think if you are running a market leading event, no one is running their business is going to say, oh, I was in Barcelona 5 months ago, so I'm not going to go again to this event because actually I have to be there as part of my job. Saying all that, look, I totally understand how pissed off Raz was. And I've known Raz for years and years and years. I started London Baby with him. SBC used to run the zone within IGB Live, how we started that sports betting community. So we've worked together for years. I understand, look, he's angry at the moment, but I think there's a big opportunity there. I think what ICE has done and what we haven't really talked about much is, rather than the way we've structured it with London, we now have a relationship with the city. So we have a relationship with the town hall. We also have a relationship with the region and the country itself. And actually, that's allowed us to have conversations around building a legacy within Barcelona, specifically around responsible gambling. So it means we can really start to build a home for gaming. And that's been, I guess, the most important thing for me in this process is, rather than thinking about the event, and when we talk to the cities and we talk to the various ministers, we're talking to them about the industry and the direction it's going. Part of the last 6 months has been educating them that we're a technology-led business. We're about entertainment. We're about leisure. And what we're not going to do is come to their city and hide behind a wall and not say we're in gambling. We're going to be proud to be in gambling, but we're also going to present the right story and the right narrative. And I think together, we can do that as kind of SBC and Clarion with that city. We have those doors open now. But I think, look, it was probably a shock, and like anything, changes is a process. And I think long term both will win. I'll be surprised if we don't. And he's got a great product.
Yeah. Absolutely, and so essentially what we're saying is the ecosystem that will be generated in Barcelona, this iGaming, it will almost be like the iGaming or gaming event capital in the world, with all the suppliers that come from that, and being able to host your stand and so on and so forth in order to use them at both sites. These are all great for both shows, I suppose, and maybe even in the future, as you say, there's space for collaboration here, who knows, on some extent. Maybe.
Yeah. All right. But look, and this industry's small. It might feel really big, but we all know it's really small. And I think when it works really well is when we all work together. And I think I see that often across media, across the B2B supplier side, but also within events.
Absolutely. We all get better when we help each other. Yeah. That is absolutely true. So perhaps a more controversial move was the fact that you also decided to move IGB Amsterdam, which is beloved show, has been there for many years. People love Amsterdam and so on. You decided to move that event to London, which is also going to take place in July still. Can you talk more to that decision, perhaps, and why did you decide to move IGB Amsterdam to London?
Yeah, IGB Live's a funny one, because I'd say it's only and people are like, oh, it's the best show, it's brilliant, it's our favourite show of the year. It didn't always used to be that. If I'm really honest, it's the sun that was just pretty ugly, and I was embarrassed to show off on the street. Now and again, it would look great, and people would want to talk about it, but it's been a hell of a journey on that show. I mean, it's 15, 16 years now, and I'd say only in the last 4 years, it's come into its own. It now has a reason to be in the industry, and actually what we've seen, particularly post-COVID, is it growing rapidly. Looking at kind of growth year on year for the last 2 years, I don't think I'd be wrong in saying it's probably the fastest growing show in the sector now, and that growth is not stopping. What we need to do is manage that carefully. I think Amsterdam can help us with that next year. and we're looking at about 25-30% growth on that floor plan. Again, we need to be careful not to grow it too fast because actually the value doesn't deliver, and in the end, stand builders make lots of money and no one else does. And I think London, for me, we might be moving ICE out of London, but I think it has a special place in my heart, but also the gaming industry heart. For me, it's the heart of online gambling for the whole world. Disregarding things like white papers and gambling acts and all these things, it is still the centre of online gambling. It's where industry's done. It's where the vast amount of the industry is based. It's where we meet and we come together. And I think having no event in that city is not good for our industry. But I also think, from a logistical perspective, it's the place that we can scale IGB Live and I think really grow it, and I think it will take it to the next level. Now, I've seen a real mixture of reaction for that one. Right. Some people saying, God, best decision yet, and many people saying, oh my God, Amsterdam's my favourite city. What are you doing? Why would you take me away?
What have you done, Alex?
What have you done? And I hope I'm not wrong. But I think that's partly because no one knew it was coming. So a surprise is never good unless it's your birthday. And I think it just came off the back of like an insane event. Like our NPS for attendee, I think it was 56. That puts it in the top 1% of shows globally. It's an NPS of plus 56 is ridiculous for an event. The average, I think.
But what was the NPS, did you say?
56 on attendee.
Oh my God!
51 on exhibitor now. Like it doubled from 25, which was still high in itself. So it's a loved show that people are recommending, and there's very few people that have felt trapped in that show. They're advocating it. But I think the DNA of that show and what it produces, and that's kind of this doing deals, networking, having fun as well. I think we can replicate that in London, and we've seen that with many of our shows that have scaled there. But I think that's up to us as organisers to make that happen. But I'm also keeping an eye on Amsterdam. We run a show in October, only affiliate Meat Market. That's a joint venture with Affiliate Summit. Launched last year, kept kind of under the radar, but actually growing steadily. Watch this space, but I'm hoping we can jam that into Amsterdam next year. So we haven't quite left it. I'm just playing musical chairs with cities.
All right. Okay. Good. You're still marking your territory with Alex. So.
You guys can.
Okay, good. That was that was the undertone here. But someone made a joke. Phil Pearson, I think it was, who said, we should iGaming should start the show in Amsterdam now and call it iGaming Next NLX.
Oh, nice.
In Amsterdam. So I said, just for the name itself, it's worth to launch a show. And so, I like it.
we can back Affiliate Meat Market onto it. There we go. We've got a festival.
Exactly, we can create the second ecosystem there, work together. I like the collaboration. So just to bring some context here for those who don't know NPS score, what you were talking about here, Alex. You said the show got an NPS score of like 56. Mm-hmm. So like when you rate that from a scale of 1 to 10, that means like on average you will get a score of like 8.5 out of 10 or something like that. Just for context. And I think, even if you organize an event and you give away an iPhone at the entrance to every single delegate, it's really hard to get a score of 8.5 out of 10 on average between delegates. So yeah, that speaks volumes, obviously, how beloved the Amsterdam show is. And but
don't get me wrong, it used to be a minus 20 many years ago, so it's been a journey.
Wow.
Which means no one's recommending
that's not as fun. Exactly, that's the opposite. Yes, that means that you take the iPhone at the entrance instead of giving it, basically. Yeah. Brilliant, Alex. So a final question to you today. Since COVID started, we've seen a lot of change between the event organizers. Obviously, we've launched a couple of new shows and new initiatives, the left, right, and center. Sigma has launched a show in every continent in the world. Mm-hmm. SPC are launching shows left, right, and center as well. But Clarion has taken a very different approach. Since COVID, you have actually decreased the amount of shows you're doing, and you are kind of more laser focused on ICE and IGB in Clarion. Why did you decide to take that route to kind of like hone in on the events that you have rather than increasing the events?
Yeah, look, I think there's a couple of reasons. Look, I came back in to run Clarion Gaming, I think about November, December 2020. And what I found, and partly why we ran this process on the location, I found that Clarion had become maybe slightly dislocated from the industry. I think it was being seen as a supplier. I don't think it was seen as a partner. I think part of our strategy and the products we were running at the time reflected that. Whether it was our digital events that, in my opinion, were driving a gap in our revenue rather than a gap in the customer need. So the first thing I did is stop all those. And then we looked at those past events, and they, on the one hand, they used huge amounts of our time and effort to drive very little profit. So there's a business decision there, but also they weren't needed by the market. And actually we were launching more and more because we wanted to take over the world, which is a great strategy. But actually, if your customers don't want you to take over the world, then it's really, you're just invading for and freeing no one, which we've seen unsuccessfully done all over the world in many, many wars. And I'll try not to align it too much into war. I think also, look, what I don't want to do is the same as everyone else. So look, you can look at something like Brazil, where we had our Brazilian event, and it was really decent, and we were there for 8 years. And we could easily relaunch that now. We've got the brand, we've got the data, we've got the relationships on the floor. But actually, all I'm doing is replicating what Sigma did, and now SBC, and I think Aventus are there, and I don't even know how many other people are running Brazilian shows right now. But there is zero value for the customer, and all you'll do is dilute the spend, dilute the attendees, and actually no one wins. So for me, it's about focus on our core. If we focus on our core, then actually the time and effort we put in means we deliver tons more value back to people, but also we make more money because it's making much better use of like our people and our time. And I think in the end we are in it to make money, but we can only make money if we put that customer first. So if a customer comes to us and says, please can you put an event on in Uzbekistan, and we get enough support and we can see a business case, we probably might look at it, but it's unlikely because it doesn't fit our strategy. But we can go in that direction using our digital products, because digital has no boundaries. So you'll see, like in Brazil, for example, we're running an entire series in local language with local partners, which is doing really well for us. It might not make as much money as an event, it might not have as bigger impact on LinkedIn and all over the place, but actually it is solving problems. And I think as long as we keep doing that, we'll win. I guess that's the short version. Medium.
Interesting. So speaking about money as well, this final question here. Another thing that was kind of alluded to in the press release when you announced that ICE is moving to Barcelona is that there may be cost efficiencies and cost savings for the partners. Is that something that you can go in a little bit more to? Does that mean that Fiera is more kind of friendly to the exhibitors than Excel? How will those cost savings look like for the exhibitors? Is there anything you can speak to on that note?
Yeah, look, and it's some of it's really difficult because it's case by case. Like rigging, for example, is so complicated. Unless we understand your entire rigging weights, how many points and all the technological parts of it, it's hard to say if you're going to save money or not. But there is very common knowledge that mainland Europe venues versus XL, on the majority of cost lines, you will save money. That's just a fact. Their business model is different. We've also heavily negotiated and been aggressive on those cost lines. So I would be really surprised if exhibitors are not making, and I'd say probably significant cost savings. And I think that helped them make their decision.
And with significant, 30%?
Anywhere between 20 and 60%, but some of those 60% might be on a very small cost line. It might not be your big one. Exactly, yeah. And actually, look, they're spending money on many areas like stand building and things like this that we have less control of. Another really interesting one is on the attendees and their cost base. And this was the biggest fascination for me, because what we did is we built a basket of goods. It was a very light basket of goods in terms of the person. You probably wouldn't want to hang out with them. They stayed for 3 nights. They had a mixture of taxis and public transport. They had a salad and a sandwich and a can of Coke. They did not live the typical gaming event life, but a very clean, healthy one. But we would then extract that into, if it was in Paris, Madrid, London, Barcelona, and then we'd look at it if they were coming from North America, if they're coming from all the various cities. And actually, you are saving on average attendee, other than if you live in London, you are saving somewhere between 400 and 800 euro per person going to the event. And then if you live in London, it's going to cost you more, naturally, unless you stay in a hotel. And actually about 50% of our exhibitors put their London employees in hotels because it's so hectic. So actually they then decrease that that increase in cost is marginal. That, for me, was really interesting because not only did it apply to our attendees, and that means actually attendees might bring 3 people rather than 2 now, or it might bring in some of the attendees that we've not had before from certain countries. But also a lot of our exhibitors, and this is why I talk about the difference between something like ICE and SBC and IGB Live, they're bringing, some of them bring 400, 500, 600 people for their stands. So when you start to times that up, it's huge. And the things like hotels, we've negotiated that for 5 years. So there's lots of bits like that will make a difference. But we've built the relationship with the cities, so we're in control of those costs. Same as and I could go on and on, but things like taxis. If there's not enough taxis, the city will issue more licenses. If there's not enough public transport, we can get more we can fundamentally not do whatever we like, but it's a hell of a lot easier when we are the only shop in town, and we're driving $250 million of economic impact in that single week.
Right. Yeah, it's a serious impact on the city and the country, of course, to host a massive event like this in a city. So
but the
I would imagine that the
interested
Barcelona guys are happy.
Yeah, look, they're interested in the event impact, but actually the bit they're really interested in, and this is the bit I found interesting when I went out there in March and we met with the Minister of Finance and we met with the Mayor and all these different people, it isn't about what the event does in that week. Like everyone knows, a giant event equals lots of revenue for the city. We've done the economic impact. What they're interested in is actually what's the gaming industry's like, how's it going to change over the next 10 years? Like, how can we position Barcelona to be the place that can help support that change? Whether it's around safer gambling, whether it's around startups or scale-ups, that's the bit that I think starts to be really interesting. And come September, October, we will invite many of our customers to start having those meetings in the town hall, to start talking about actually how does this city really embrace having this industry in town, rather than can we put our cans of Coke in bedrooms up to make more money?
Buy a flat in Barcelona before the prices go up here the next 5 or 10 years and the iGaming industry takes over. Check. Alex, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and clarifying all of this. Really interesting stuff, of course, for me as an organizer myself. It's interesting to see how these things come together and learn from it. I'm looking forward to visit both the SBC show and ICE in 2025. And all the best of luck.
Thank you. No, it should be fun.